Welcome back to our Policy 101 series with ILMEA. We are in week 5 of this series, and over the past couple of weeks, we've taken a pretty broad look at policy and advocacy and legislation here in Illinois. And today we are going to be zooming into a more local level of governance by talking about unions and what unions are set up to do and how we can get involved. I'm joined once again by my colleague, Lauren Rupert, our policy and advocacy intern here in the ILMEA state office. So Lauren, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning.
All right, well, let's start, like I mentioned, with just a broad look at what is a union, what is it set up to do, and what is its role in the life of a public educator?
Absolutely. So the union's role is to be the teacher's collective voice with administrators to help protect teachers. So this is not something, I think a common misconception can be like, oh, the union is here to solve all of my problems. The union is not here to solve all of your problems. So they are not the only people who can and should communicate with administrators. So it's still up to teachers to develop a working relationship with your admin and try and handle individual problems first. However, the union's role is to protect us, as for the most part, we probably know. It can be very easy with that's what collective bargaining does, all of those things, to make sure that we have fair work environments set in place. So the union jumps in when something is happening on a large scale that affects multiple teachers. You're not required to be part of your union, but there are many benefits to joining, such as having legal protection, access to professional resources, having your voice heard, and a variety of discounts. And I should add that if you choose not to join your union, you still are covered by the contract. So you still get the salary, you still get the wage increases, you still get the benefits outlined by your district, but you don't really get that opportunity to make your voice heard in the process.
And the more people are part of a union, the more powerful their collective voice is too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unions give advice, they can help you interpret the contract, and something that I think is particularly useful is you can request a union representative to be with you in any meeting with an administrator. So if something's happening, let's say with an evaluation that is not quite going the way that you like, that you're worried about, you can have a union representative in your meeting with you to act as that third party witness, neutral voice, anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we're taking this broad view of what a union is, who a union is, especially thinking about early service educators. I think a lot of people are missing this piece of information. So as I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm glad we're really laying it out, because there's an assumption that everyone knows what a union is, except a lot of early service teachers don't. So just even having that, who are they about, what are they for, I think is really helpful way to start. So you mentioned contract negotiations, and we've talked about collective voices. And I think the most obvious and upfront way that most of our educator members are going to interact with the union is where the contract is concerned. In fact, I asked one of our members over the weekend about their own personal union involvement, knowing that this conversation was coming up, and asked what they wish had been different or was different. And they specifically mentioned how when they were an early service educator, no one walked them through the contract. So, as a first year educator in their early 20s with no experience with unions before, they felt like they were going in blinded with very little information or even no information. So could you walk us through what types of things does a contract cover? What should someone look for in a teaching contract or throughout that collective bargaining agreement process?
Yes. So you might, as you've I just want to clarify quickly, you might hear the contract referred to as two different things. So we've kind of used interchangeably here already, your teaching contract or the collective bargaining agreement. Both of those mean the same thing. It's the teaching contract. It normally goes on a multi-year cycle. So that kind of varies from district to district. You might have a 4-year contract. You might have 3 years, 5 years. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your job is guaranteed for 5 years, but that means that after the 5 years, the bargaining team, which is normally comprised of the superintendent, administrators, and teachers, comes together to reevaluate the contract, make changes, and move forward.
And I will say too, that it also doesn't mean that you're locked into teaching there for that number of years. Because when I was a first year teacher and I was signing a contract and the principal said, and this is a 5-year contract, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, I'm signing up to work here for 5 years. I need a job though, so I signed the contract. Later on, understanding it meant the contract was valid for 5 years.
Right,
So
exactly.
that's an important distinction to make when we assume that people understand one thing, it's actually a different thing. So all of these baseline items are really good to set out to.
Yeah, they are. Thank you. So the first thing that you should know is that a contract is publicly available information. If it's not provided to you when the job is being offered to you, you should be able to request a copy of it from the person offering you the job, or you can find it online. Most districts now do have copies of their collective bargaining agreements somewhere on the district's website. You might have to Google it a little bit. I highly recommend, if you're applying to a district, even before you hear back, go into Google, do a quick search, type in, the name of the school district, collective bargaining agreement, and see what pops up. That can really give you a good idea of a district before you even move forward in the process. So some of the information that you want to look out for, what's the salary? That's going to be laid out right there in the collective bargaining agreement. And how does it increase over the next few years? So if you have a 5-year contract, it's going to outline for the next 5 years, what is your salary going to look like? Look for support with continuing education. Are they going to pay for you to receive your master's degree? Will they pay for part of it? How can they help you with that? Some schools do a great job with that. Some schools don't help you at all. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely look for that. The collective bargaining agreement will outline your workload requirement. So specifically, you can see if they mention anything in terms of music. They may or may not, depending on how big the school's contract is. But you should know, look, are you teaching full time? Is there a possibility that you'll be teaching non-music classes? I know some colleagues who they do have a full-time teaching job, teaching music, but there aren't enough students to kind of fulfill all of their music hours. So sometimes they get pulled to act as a reading specialist or something like that. So take a look, see what your actual workload will be. Also super important, how much prep and plan time do you receive a week? So if you're a new teacher, your preparation time and your plan time is the time allotted to you to prepare for all of your classes. But look in the language, is that time guaranteed to you? Or can you be pulled out to sub during your plan time or participate in meetings? And then speaking of subbing, I highly suggest, especially right now where subs are so hard to come by, what does internal subbing look like in your district? So internal subbing is when professional teachers are pulled out of their own class, or I shouldn't say pulled out of your classroom, but pulled away from your plan or prep time to go sub within your building. So do you get paid for this? Do you have to do it for free? All of these different things to look for can really affect your quality of life as a teacher.
And even if you have a choice in the matter, if some schools have different pay scales for if you opt into internal subbing or if it's not made the choice for you. Those pay scales, those hourly rates can be different too. So even just having that information can be very empowering for teachers, knowing what they are entitled to in terms of time and also compensation. Okay, so if someone is a union member, we mentioned having union representatives and working with administrators. So let's talk about union personnel for just a minute. How is that usually set up in a district, and how can an educator expect to work with their union personnel?
Absolutely. So all of your union personnel are going to be fellow teachers and teaching professionals. So you'll have definitely a union president. And then depending on the scale of your district, you might have a larger union or you might have a smaller union. So for example, in the district where I worked, we had an executive union board with a president, secretary, treasurer, all of those things. And then each school building also had building representatives. The building representatives are going to be the teachers or the paraprofessionals in your building who are going to be your direct link to the union, the people that you want to have the most contact with. This is really important for us as music teachers because a union's job is to represent the collective. Now, we are often a small percentage of the staff. You might be the only music teacher on the staff. You might just have a group of 4 or 5 of you on the staff. And so this can be pretty difficult when it comes to contract negotiations, because if they're representing the collective, they're not necessarily thinking about how is this going to impact these 4 or 5 people. So what I recommend, start off, figure out who your union reps are. If your district has a really union forward mentality, they're probably out there introducing themselves to you on the first day of school. They're making announcements, but they also might not. So if you're in a district where the union reps aren't necessarily out there introducing themselves, figure out who they are. So start there and then get to know your union reps personally as well as professionally. It is all about relationships.
We've heard
So
that
don't
times. It's all about
right, exactly. So don't make all of your conversations about union business. Just get to know your union reps as people, and they're going to want to be more, they will be more willing to help you in that case. And I would just encourage you. So I have been a union rep. Take your time and be thoughtful before approaching your union reps. This is an unpaid volunteer position. No one gets paid to be a union rep. They are taking their time to serve you. And people are rarely approaching a union rep for a good reason. People are normally upset, have a problem. So don't just go to your union rep the second that you hear about information, because you're going to be upset, angry, and heated. Take some time, cool down, think about what's going on, and just really be conscious of their time. So don't try and snag a union rep a minute before their class is starting. Try and go maybe before or after school. Find a good time to talk to them that's not going to feel like too much of an imposition. And then I would say, from my experience, I think most union reps are really kind and good-hearted, well-intentioned people. If for some reason you find that your union rep is not responding to you, which we've heard about happening before, I would say start by seeking out another member of the union team and just kind of try and find those alternative methods to connect with someone.
Right. And especially in bigger buildings, there will often be a number of building reps for that reason, because there are so many people who may need assistance and support. So that's why it's good, especially to, like you mentioned, develop those relationships personally and professionally with a number of different people in your building as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about relationships many times throughout this series. We've talked about different ways to get involved at the state level, and the same is true for this local level too, especially where it comes to the collective bargaining process, that whole process of negotiating the contract and the contract language. So can you talk a little bit about that process, and especially why music educators and arts educators might want to get involved in that?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, when we are going through contract negotiations, it's not every single person in the district who sits down to negotiate. There is a team, and there's going to be, from the union side, a team of teachers who are part of the contract negotiations representing the teachers and the teachers' interests. Now, hopefully they're reporting back to the membership throughout the process, giving details. But either way, I strongly, strongly recommend if you can, get involved, be part of the bargaining team, or have another fine arts person on the committee. This can be really hard for music teachers. We already have so many out of school commitments, but ensuring that there is a fine arts person on your committee is key because these are the people who understand what we do. Even if it's not a music teacher, having the art teacher still helps a lot because we operate in similar spheres. I will add that when looking for members of the bargaining team, we usually are wanting tenured teachers, people whose jobs are secure, who are not really at risk for something going awry and threatening their job during bargaining. So if you're a non-tenured teacher, don't feel pressured to join the bargaining team, but you can still get involved in other ways. So I would say if you can either not serve yourself or if you're a non-tenured teacher, make sure you know who the people on your bargaining team are and have a good relationship with them, similar to the union reps. If negotiation tactics aren't transparent, you really want to be going to this person, seeing what they can tell you about what's going on in terms of music. Are they planning to cut minutes for your program, anything like that? You want someone on the inside who can advocate on your behalf or keep you in the loop if needed.
I'm hearing a lot of echoes in this conversation with what we talked about last week with Allison from the Illinois Principals Association, where policies at the state level, just like policies at the local level, the people who write them and the people who develop them really have education and at the heart of it and are well-intentioned, but may not always have a deep understanding of how that impacts educators in real time, especially music educators. Like you mentioned, as people shift around a schedule or teaching load and compensation, that can have a really specific and unique impact on music educators. And so again, the relationships are so important, and developing those relationships. And also I think accountability, where, if a negotiation meeting happened, maybe a day or two later, shoot an email to a member of the committee and just say, hey, wondered if you had any updates for us as a music educator. Here's what I'm looking for, just to keep that line of communication open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thought I had as you were saying, one of those ways that we operate that's different, often music teachers are traveling between buildings. Not many teachers are doing that. Same with art teachers, PE teachers. And so even just little things like that with scheduling can really throw our jobs off and other people wouldn't even realize.
And it also gives an opportunity to develop more relationships throughout the district, where your impact can be that much broader because of your unique position as a music educator that travels.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think this was really helpful. I hope, especially for early service educators who may be unfamiliar with this framework, I hope it was helpful to those folks listening in as well. As always, if you have questions, we have that email address set up for Lauren, the advocacy at ilmea.org. We welcome and encourage your questions so that we know how best to serve you and how to address topics that are at the forefront of your mind. Lauren, thank you again for bringing this information and being part of this conversation. And we look forward to seeing everyone back here next week.